Hello, today we'll be discussing the impacts of HPV vaccination and pap smears on cervical cancer incidence. HPV, or more formally known as human papillomavirus, is a group of over 200 related DNA viruses that can infect many parts of your body. These viruses can be spread through different ways, but most commonly and most importantly, they are spread through skin-to-skin and sexual contact. These 200 types of HPV can be further divided into two main subgroups, the low-risk and the high-risk group. The low-risk group does not lead to cancer but is associated with things such as genital warts, whereas the high-risk one is typically associated with cancer, with roughly 10 genotypes associated with 85% of all cervical cancers, and then further strains 16 and 18 being associated with roughly 70% of these types of cancers. As a result, we'll be talking about the high-risk HPV subgroup.
So we know that HPV is a DNA virus, but how does a viral infection turn into cancer? Well, the HPV genome consists of oncogenes E6 and E7. During infection, these viral proteins are highly expressed. The constant expression of these oncogenes allow for the virus to take over normal processes that occur in your cells, such as tumor suppression. The E6 and E7 protein inhibit and degrade important regulators in your cells, including P53 and PRB, therefore turning your cells into proliferating machinery that propagates the virus over and over. This excessive cell growth can eventually result in cancer. HPV is typically associated with cervical cancer. However, HPV infection can actually cause a variety of different cancers, such as anal cancer, oropharyngeal cancer, penile cancer, vaginal cancer, and vulvar cancer. The best way to prevent HPV infection is by getting vaccinated. The HPV vaccine is used as a preventative measure, so once you're infected, it can't do much. Unlike other vaccines you may have gotten, the HPV vaccine is not made of live viruses or even contain any part of the DNA genome. Instead, it contains a virus-like particle, otherwise known as VLPs, which are formed by surface components from the virus. The VLPs resemble the virus but aren't infectious, which makes them very safe. The HPV vaccine stimulates an immune response in your body to induce antibody production. These antibodies then bind to the virus and prevent it from infecting your cells. The 4-valent HPV vaccine was first introduced in 2006, but by 2010, the incident rate of HPV had decreased by around 56%. And with increasing HPV vaccination rates before the age of 17, this has led to a 90% reduction in invasive cervical cancer risk. Currently, all provinces and territories have a school-based HPV immunization program for boys and girls offered on a 2 or 3 dose schedule. Currently, with improvements to safety and efficacy of the vaccine, the HPV vaccine protects against 90% of the HPV strains that cause cervical cancer, 90% of the strains that cause anal cancer, 90% of the strains that cause genital warts, and most strains that cause mouth and throat cancers.
As mentioned before, oftentimes cervical cancer presents with no symptoms. That's why cervical tests, usually in the form of a pap smear, are so important. Screening by pap smears allows for the detection of abnormal cells early on, therefore allowing for proper treatment before they can even develop into cervical cancer. Pap smears are considered a minimally invasive procedure that can detect 7 in 10 cases of precancer or cancer cells. It is recommended to get your first pap smear at age 21 or if you are sexually active. This procedure involves gathering a sample of cells from the cervix and analyzing it for any abnormalities. To summarize on the research done from the last 100 years on cervical cancer detection and therapeutics, we have made this short timeline. Pap smears were first introduced in 1928 as a way to detect malignant cervical cancers. By the 1940s, universal cervical cancer screening became widespread across North America. Further research identified HPV as the main risk factor to cervical cancer, being involved in 99.7% of all cervical cancer cases. In 2006, scientists developed the first HPV vaccine, which has since undergone several improvements and iterations. In present day, 3 HPV vaccine programs are implemented in schools across all provinces and territories as a way to help combat the risk of not only cervical cancer, but of all HPV-associated cancers. Thank you so much for watching, and please consult our magazine for more details.